Hey guys, welcome to Spirit Pig. I'm Duncan CJ, and today I'm talking to Fred Branson. Fred is the co-founder of Amintani UK, and which is an award-winning charity which works to improve the lives of Peruvian children. Fred established Amintani in 2007 when he noticed big problems between the education system in remote areas, where children would often forced to work and walk for up to 8 hours a day just to get to their closest school. And once they got to the school, exhausted, the standardised curriculum seemed irrelevant to their indigenous lives. And so he set up Amintani to combat these two problems, with a focus on respect for their local customs and cultures. And basically, their work has just received like huge, amazing media attention. And Fred was recently invited to give a TED talk the other day, all about the art of giving. So it is so exciting to talk to you today. Fred, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me, Duncan. It's a pleasure.
Now, what was the moment? Because I know that you were on your gap year, you're traveling around Peru, and I think you're working in an orphanage in Peru, and then on your last day, you went up into the Andes and up in the mountains, and I think was that when you were exposed to the Quechua regions for the first time? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was. Looking back, it was pretty crazy, really. I was 18. I'd just left school. I'd always had this idea of going to South America. I was obsessed with. I started learning Spanish when I was 12, so obsessed with the idea of going to South America. Went out there, spent 5 months out there traveling through Argentina, Chile, Bolivia. Got up to Peru. And did a month's voluntary work in an orphanage project up there. And then it was on my last day, after 5 months in South America, just before I got on the plane back home, that I went up to Cauca, which is this indigenous district. It's just an hour from the city of Cusco. So it's really close to what you would call a kind of Western city. My classic is that I always say is that it's got a McDonald's, to kind of put it in perspective. So it's a pretty Western city, and then you just go up for an hour away from this city along a little dirt track, and you get to Cauca, which just feels like a completely other world altogether. And I'd been traveling through South America for about 5 months, but I'd never actually taken that much of a detour off the tourist route in order to actually see a bit of the reality behind the scenes. And so, yeah, it was, to be honest, it was a bit of a flying visit. We went up, we walked into a few classrooms, met with some of the children, met with some of the teachers, met with some of the parents. And then before I knew it, I was back in Cusco and then back on the plane on the way back home. So it was...
What I was going to say, just what was that? Was there like a moment, because when you got back home, you decided just to change your entire life and just basically just jump straight head in and like focus like your whole life basically towards setting up this charity, helping others. What was the moment? Was it literally that one day where it was just like, I've got to do something about it, or was it something which had been a seed that was planted in your head, or where did that come about?
Yeah, I think it was like I think that day was like the last straw. It was something that was building up. I think it kind of started off in a really small way in other countries in South America and Argentina. Like, it was the first time that I'd been exposed to any kind of poverty that was that visual and that material and that obvious. And so that was kind of playing its part as I was traveling through Peru. And then I got to Cusco, and I did this voluntary work in an orphanage project. And this orphanage project is in the city of Cusco itself, but I soon realized that the vast majority of the children in the orphanage are actually from rural areas like Cauca. So they're sons and daughters of indigenous farmers from the mountains or from the jungle. And so I was kind of, wondering why so many children end up in an orphanage, and so many indigenous children end up in an orphanage. And then I met two women who basically kind of inspired me. I saw the problem. I saw that so many children were being abandoned and left in these homes. And then on the other hand, I saw the solution, because these two women were just incredible. One is this Spanish lady who moved over there 20 years ago, and she's the closest thing to a saint I've ever met. In fact, she should be talking to you on here. You should get her on the show if her English is good enough. She's just got no concept of work life. She's just absolutely 100% dedicated in the most pure way to helping children in Peru. And so she was just like a massive inspiration to see that someone was actually being useful in the world and doing something of purpose. And then I met another woman, a Peruvian teacher, and she said, well, look, if you want to help the children in the orphanage, don't help them at the end of the cycle when they've ended up in the orphanage and the problem's kind of already there. Go out into rural communities and start working with education. And so she said, come with me to the community where I work, which is Corca, where we now work, and have a look at the problems that are happening with education here. And this is why all the children you've been working with are in that orphanage. Yeah. So it everything kind of came together on the last day, and it all made sense. That if I wanted to do something to help the kind of children that I was working with, that the best place to do it would actually be in Corca with the teacher that I met.
That's crazy. And nowadays, right now, what is your motivation? Is your motivation today the same as it's always been 8 years ago? Or has it changed and developed over years? What's the big picture? What drives you?
I think in the early days it was like blind faith. It was more. I think in the early days it was more the problem that motivated me. There was an urgent need that children weren't able to get to school, and I was in a position to do something about it, and I felt I wanted to do something about it. And so it was very much more geared towards the problem, and I met with children who had really sad stories, and I was working kind of against those stories almost. I was working to try and avoid those stories.
Yeah.
But now, as the years have gone on, we've had more children come through the projects that have actually come out the other side and have gone on to university or gone on, and one girl in particular who went on to study at university.
I was going to ask you about that because I'm just trying to, Marlene. I mean, can you maybe just describe, because I remember when you were, I went to what we're going to talk about in a sec, like Meet My World, and you told the story of this girl called Marlene. Can you maybe just describe who Marlene is and what was her dream?
Yeah, I mean, she's the main source of motivation for me because she shows what's possible when we do our work well. She was the first girl, one of the first girls who ever came into the boarding houses back in 2008 when we first opened the boarding house. We had 20 girls come in from the local secondary school, and Marlene was one of them. And she comes from a very typical background in Corca, problems at home with the dad, with alcoholism, which is a big problem out there, and in turn that creates a really chaotic, violent home life. So she kind of, on the one hand, she had this similar background to all these children in Corca, but for some reason she has always stood out as being different. She's so driven and so confident. She, out of nowhere, she just has this amazing inner confidence that she can walk into any room and she's got presence, and she believes that she's entitled to do whatever she wants. And so she ended up finishing top of her class at the secondary school, and that basically gave her access to a scholarship to go to university in the local city. And it was, when we first started the project, the aim was, one of the dreams was that one of the children might be able to go to university if they wanted to. And everyone said, well, that's impossible. No one from the district had ever been to university before. And so she just completely changed everything. And for the younger kids, it's just awesome. They love her. They look up to her so much because she shows what is possible if you put your mind to it. So
what did that feel like personally, on a personal level? Because with having that dream of everyone's saying it's not possible, and she's seeing Marlene as an example of what is possible, with actually the right drive, on a personal level, that must have felt amazing, did it?
Yeah, I don't know, to kind of, I remember going out for dinner with Marlene when we were celebrating her going into university, and I felt the kind of pride that I don't know, a teacher would feel for an old student. It was amazing to see how happy she was, basically, and Yeah, I think it was interesting because the relationship just completely changed from that day on. Like there was no longer any kind of hierarchy of teacher pupil or in terms, me being the Western gringo, and that kind of got swiped off the floor. And now we're just really good friends. You can meet up and have dinner together, and it's more of like an equal relationship rather than any kind of hierarchy, which is surreal because when I first met her, she was 12. I mean, I was 18, so I was still pretty young, and I was the age she is now. So it's strange, but it's fantastic.
I think one thing which jumped out when I was I've obviously I've followed Amintani and your progress for years, but one thing things like lack of water, food, shelter are quite obvious things, not obvious things, but you can see and measure. You can see and measure things. One thing I think which is really interesting, what you guys do as well, is you focus a lot on helping children with like low self-esteem and lack of belief in their traditional roots, and which is maybe not something which is so obvious, but it's instrumental to how they view themselves, how they see life. And one thing I'd really love to hear you just describe is Meet My World, and in particular this idea of helper and the helped. This idea of actually what we can learn from them. That was a really bad description. You can obviously describe
No,
that
no,
a lot
no.
better. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's. I'm just trying to work out the best way to approach it.
Well,
It's like this. It's this
yeah.
massive theme in all of our heads, and it always has been since the very beginning. And it's this huge concept that can be spoken about from lots of different angles. But I guess it all started when. In the early days when we were working with the children, and I was out there as a young guy doing my best to help them in whatever way I could, and I quickly realised that actually the learning wasn't moving in one direction, and actually I was learning a lot from them, and that I think sometimes the way that life in developing communities is presented to us back in the UK slightly changes our perception of what life is like in those communities. And not all of us have the possibility to go and visit these communities and to live with people and to get to know them. And so a lot of, and not to badmouth any NGOs, but I think a lot of the NGOs out there who are, admirably trying to raise funds for their cause, but they sometimes go about it by really highlighting the problem and really sensationalizing, if I can even say it, the problem, and really building up feelings of pity and guilt in people in the UK so that they're driven to make a donation to their cause. And so it changes the way people look at life in developing communities. And our idea is to look at the positives and the resilience and the potential that these communities have, and to show the world that actually, sure, they've got problems, and like we all do, and their problems are material, and we can help in that way. But they've also got a culture which is thousands of years old, and that we in the West can be listening to, because they're things which can all too easily be forgotten, I guess. And so they're like this voice that needs to be listened to in the world, because they're still living according to old customs and traditions, and they still have a lot of wisdom which we don't necessarily have. And so, so in terms of how that kind of translates into our work with the children, the other point of view, to the other kind of bit of background that people need to know, is that in Peru, as in many parts of the world, indigenous people aren't seen very well. There's a lot of prejudice, a lot of racism against indigenous people, Quechua people, which is the biggest indigenous group in Peru. And so, and it's largely, down to the way they live, their hygiene levels, their education levels, their lack of literacy skills, etc. And it means that if young people were to migrate to the local city or to bigger cities in Peru, they come up against this huge wall of racism and marginalization, kind of telling them that they're not worth the same as other people. And so in Peru, the whole idea of Meet My World was to show the children that their culture is fantastic, that their communities are strong and vibrant, and that they have things to teach people in the world. So
yeah, that's amazing. And for anyone who I went about maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago. There was a cinema in London, absolutely full, full to the brink, and they had these short videos which were made by the children in Peru in these communities, and they were actually teaching us stuff. So they were, how to like, catch a fish with their hands, how to dye wool, and all these amazing sort of traditions which have been passed down from generation to generation, and actually the whole emphasis was then actually what we can learn from them. And yeah, I mean, you said it as well. It was an amazing moment, and you then took those videos back to the communities, and you saw the reactions. These videos and these films were shown like countries all around the world in front of thousands and thousands of people, and by showing them, actually, this is a tradition and these are cultures that you should be proud of. And so you are actually helping them be proud of their heritage, which is just an amazing idea. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, which it's like the best geography lesson ever, to bring up the map of the world with all the 110 countries where their films have been viewed, each highlighted, and kind of going into the different countries, explaining what the name is and what goes on in that country. So yeah, and for us, it's, I guess, a lot of charities focus on the material, which is important. But to be honest, the poverty in Peru is different to poverty in other parts of the world. It's a cultural poverty, and it's very much poverty very much follows along the lines of race, and it's largely Quechua people that are alienated from modern society. And so our idea is that it goes back to fulfillment in some way, that for the children to lead a happy and fulfilled life, the core thing is kind of accepting yourself and to have that self-esteem, to believe in who you are as a person. And such a big part of that is where you come from and your cultural identity. So it all plays into that, really.
Yeah, because I mean, we touched on it there, but like one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you was that we often assume in the westernized modern world that, we've got it right, and you could, and this is how life should be. But I mean, you could just as easily argue that, in fact, these traditional communities have actually got a much better grasp and understanding of life and actually, tradition, and, maybe we're the ones, like you said, we should be learning from them. So that I want to kind of almost turn it on its head. And actually, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because when we're talking about happiness and fulfillment, we assume like the modern world is the way to do it, but a lot of we can learn so much from all these ancient traditions and cultures, and from all around the world, which is why I think the Meet My World project was such an amazing project.
Yeah, there's two things, which there's two kind of sayings, I guess. One from the Quechua culture, in the Quechua language, there's no word for poverty as we understand it. There's no concept of poverty in that sense, and their understanding of poverty is the person. So the poorest person would be the person with fewest people around them. So essentially, poverty for them is loneliness. And I think that's pretty powerful in relation to our concept of poverty and loneliness.
Absolutely.
And the other one is the other one that springs to mind is that. Because you're talking about kind of learning from traditions and ancient cultures, and I guess some people would question if there's any merit in that and what there is to learn. And I think we kind of, in our fight for progress, we quite often think that the next generation knows more than the generation that preceded it. Whereas I've spoken to some communities in Peru that believe that each generation knows less than the one before it, which I really loved as a kind of concept of progress.
I like that a lot. Yeah, because I think a lot of the things which, through some of these interviews that I've been doing, I mean, kind of an idea or a kind of theme which has been sort of toying in my mind is actually a lot of the stuff. It's not about learning anything new. It's almost just trying to unlearn all the actual, all the stuff. We kind of deep down, we kind of know, we kind of get life, we kind of understand how to be happy and stuff like that. And it's actually unlearning all the stuff, all these distractions, which we're kidding ourselves, all these material things, but no, I like that
Sure.
idea of I like the idea of the generation. Every time we know a little bit less than the one before.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Do you think that because it's kind of tied in what we were just talking there, but I guess in the Western world, you could say that we've lost, some of our respect and connection back to like nature and back to our planet. And with the Quechua communities, they've got this relationship with Pachamama or like Mama Earth. Like, what is that? Have they got that close relationship with the land and with nature? Is that do they have that kind of quite close bond?
Yeah, very much so. Good research, by the way. Pachamama. Not a lot of people know that word. Yeah, they. I guess they live so close to the land, and for thousands of years, their communities have depended on nature. So they look at everything has life. So every single, literally, even this bottle of water has life. Everything that we think is an inanimate object for them has life and deserves respect. And for them, they live so close to the land that they need to respect the land in order for it to support them in their agricultural processes. So they depend on it in a way that we do as well, but we feel so distant from that connection that we don't quite realize the respect that it warrants. So yeah, I think because they live so close to it, and because they're self-sufficient farmers, so they sell off very little of what they make, and the majority of what they grow is actually to feed themselves and their families and their communities. So they have, I think, they completely different way of looking at the world. It's just fundamentally different in the way that we see ourselves as separate from the world and separate from nature, and we might be guilty of seeing nature as a resource, as something which can be measured and cut up and sold, and something that we can use for our ends, whereas they see nature as something that you have to negotiate with and converse with, and there's this kind of reciprocal connection between the two, and they see themselves very much within nature and inside of it, and I think it changes the way they look at it. And for them, Earth is their mother, so it takes on this kind of whole nurturing feel to it, and there's a lot more feeling in their relationship with nature than we might have, and the way that we might look at it.
I think that's amazing. Like, I think a lot of the things I'm actually learning and reading and finding out about, a lot of it's actually pointing back to actually what you were just saying there. I think they probably got it a lot more right than actually we do. What on a bit of a detour, but what have you personally got from like the last 8 years? Like, how do you think your life has changed, or what are kind of the big sort of learnings or lessons do you feel? I'm putting you on the spot there a bit. Like, sorry.
So much. No, I think I guess when it all started, I felt like I was making a sacrifice, but I realised that that's not the case at all. That it's given me a lot more than I've given it, if that can be said. What's it given me? I guess it's given me. It's given me a lot of happiness, met with a lot of stress as well. So it kind of is given me both. But I think it's the sense of purpose, sense of responsibility for something bigger than yourself, which I think gives you meaning. I think it's forced me to do things I hate doing, which I think is a good thing. I used to completely hate public speaking. I don't like doing accounts and boring things like that. But because you care and you want it to work, you end up, and because you're a small team, you end up doing lots of different things that you never would have dreamt of doing, which I think is good, because it pushes you out of your comfort zone and makes you learn lots of different things.
That's great. No, it's in. I mean, when I heard you speak a few months ago, it was unbelievably eloquent, and like we were actually saying, like we were all just like chatting actually in the crowd. We couldn't believe it. You're just going marching up and down the stage, just holding forth. No, it was awesome.
Yeah, I went to when I was 15. No, I was older than that. I was 18. I went to like public speaking for the fearful course or something like that to try and get over it. So yeah, it's been a long old journey.
Now, just a couple of speed round questions to finish up. Like, what does a fulfilled life mean to you?
I think it's different for everyone, but for me, as for what I kind of, if I'm looking for fulfillment in my life, I'm probably looking for a sense of purpose. I think for me, purpose gives me meaning, and that doesn't have to be. I think it's kind of feeling connected to something bigger than yourself and feeling passionate about something bigger than yourself, and that could be. And it could be a person, it could be people that you're connected to, or it could be a cause, or it could be a passion that you have. But it's, having connection to something bigger than yourself, basically.
That's so cool. And what is one thing our listeners can do today that will have a massive positive effect on their lives?
Well, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't say donate to Amintani, would I? So I think, either make a donation to Amintani or another plug, but why not? Log on to see the children's films, because I think they're pretty uplifting, and they come from children in the Andes who don't have a lot, but I'm sure they can put a smile on your face.
Yeah, I'm going to link that up in the show notes. And are there any books or resources which have changed or had a big impact on you? There's when I was talking about the relationship that Quechua people have with nature and how it's fundamentally different to our relationship with nature is from a book called The Spirit of Regeneration, and it's by a Peruvian NGO who called Pratec, and they're kind of big inspiration for us. They started back in the 90s, and they know their stuff. And then the other one would be Growing Up in a Culture of Respect, which is all about childhood in the Andes and the traditional education system in the Andes before schools or books or teachers ever came along, and actually how fantastic it was, and how children would grow up into young people and young adults without the concept of adolescence just didn't really exist. It was almost kind of seamless transition into adult life from childhood, and it's all these things which they've been developed over time, but not consciously. No one sat down and planned the Andean culture's curriculum, but they're just, it's genius. Those two probably. Amazing. And last but not least, how can people stay in touch, find out more about you and all your work with Amintani?
Best place to go is amintani.org.uk. And in terms of like regular updates, Facebook's the best place to go. We tend to keep uploading stuff on Facebook, so I'd go there.
Fred, thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking to us today. It's been incredible. I really enjoyed it.
No, good one. Thank you, Duncan. Good luck with it.
We'll catch you soon. I don't know if we mentioned at the beginning, but you're in Lima, so you're going to be out there for a few more months. But maybe catch you up when you're back in England.
Yeah, absolutely. See you then.
See you there, dude.